Join us right now on the Mattress Warehouse Hotline, our pal Rick Snider, columnist for thefandc.com. Hey, Rick.
Hey, boys.
Sounds like you got an excited dog in the background.
Rick?
That's not my dog.
Oh, that's not yours?
Oh, really?
No, I don't have a
Who
dog.
do you think
I don't have
it
a-
is?
That's Luca? I sounded like it was coming from Rick's house.
No, it's my dog. No, I don't have a dog anymore. Not me.
Yeah. Hey, all right. So listen.
Definitely
so you
Luca.
have a long relationship with Marty Hurney, right? And he has a kind of a wild journey to be
Hurney's
the GM
journey.
here. Hurney's journey. It doesn't happen very often where a guy works in media or PR and ends up being the GM. Can you talk about when you worked with Marty and sort of his route to being the GM here?
All right, so I met Marty in 1985 at the Washington Times. I was actually hired to take over horse racing from him, and he went to the Redskins. So, he owned the beat for about 4 years. He kicked everybody's butt. Very singularly minded, very hard-working kind of guy, but also someone that's not going to talk to you very long. He's a hit and miss. I mean, he's like a lot like Capsule in that respect. So you're not going to hear a lot about Marty every day. You know, he's back there grinding and working. And like most old newspaper men, he doesn't care what you think. So he's not
Right.
worried about polls. Bethard really liked him when he was covering the team. So Bethard hired him. They put him on PR for a year. And then Bethard made him his assistant for a year or so. Then Bethard went to San Diego and took Marty with him and made him like the cap expert. This was still in the late 80s, 90s when cap was really new. And
Right.
Marty took to it. Seeing Marty's expense reports, I don't know how he became a capologist, but, I was amazed by that. But, he's always been a hard grinder, and he's a team builder. So he stayed with Bethard for quite a few years. I think Bethard retired. Marty went to Carolina, a couple under jobs, and then moved up to GM. Got fired, brought back, and then recently let go because he didn't agree with the new owner, who's an analytics nerd.
Well,
How often has that
have-
happened?
Go ahead, Eric.
How often has that happened, though, where you've got a media guy that ends up being in the front office? I know now we see it like in baseball, we see agents, they become GMs. Maybe even in basketball, we may have even seen that.
Sure, Lakers.
But it's not very often that a journalist ends up becoming a general manager.
Yeah, it's a pretty surprising route. But, it's all about grinding in the NFL, too. Could I be the next GM of Washington? I'd hire a lot of smart people around me and just oversee it. I mean, hey,
Right.
Vinny was a GM. I mean, let's talk about it. Yeah. Bruce Allen was a GM.
Well, they're
I mean, these guys were
stooges. Both of those
disasters.
guys they're stooges and cronies.
yeah, but at least Vinny was like a football guy. Maybe he was a recruiting guy for Notre Dame or whatever, but at least he was in that world. He was on the right side of the fence. I mean, Marty's like on the wrong side.
Yeah, I mean, what we do is second guess what the other guys are doing, basically. It's like
Right.
no different than one of you becoming a GM, really. So
Yeah.
I think he's qualified because he's been in the NFL now, 30 years?
Agreed.
He's not going to be the guy making the draft picks because that's Ron Rivera. We have to remember the first thing Dan Snyder said, besides Happy Thanksgiving, was this is a coach-centric team, and everything revolves around Rivera, and the draft will still revolve around Rivera. You'll have other guys bringing all their input to the table, but I've never believed this BS that they give out about it was a group decision. No, it's not. It's one guy has to make the decision, and that's going to be Ron. They're not going to take a guy that Ron doesn't want. Put it that way. So Marty will have some input into these things. I think Marty's going to be taking a lot of the nitty-gritty away from Ron that, detail stuff that doesn't pertain to coaching that Ron's had to deal with. That's where he's going to earn, lessen his burden. And the two have worked together for so long that, it's an easy transition for him. This is all about making Ron the coach and not the other things.
Should fans be worried that if you look at his track record, only 3 winning seasons during as many years as a GM in Carolina?
Well, I mean, it doesn't foster hope, but, he also drafted some really good guys, and he was part of a Super Bowl team. So you sit there and circle the bad stuff. There's still good stuff, too. It's what people forget to always look at. The Twitter world loves to throw the dart at you. But Marty's done a lot of good things, too. But, he's human. He's had some mistakes like they all do. I mean, we've had guys come through here who are supposed to be great. McLuhan, what happened there? His drafts were disasters. and he was supposed to be the expert. So there's a lot that goes into all this.
Well, he's certainly done a good job at the top of the draft. That's been well documented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His first-round picks have been good.
I'm hoping Marty makes me minister of disinformation. I'll never talk to you again.
What about Mayhew? What about Mayhew coming in? What do you think about that?
I knew him a little as a player, but I didn't know him very well. He certainly has a very well-rounded resume. I think it was a good pick. A lot of people wanted him. So I'm a little surprised he took this job with maybe not as much power as he might have been able to grab elsewhere. But, guys come back to Washington at times, too. They like the area. A lot of players like to stay here because it's a good area to live in versus some of the other cities. So right. I'm not surprised. And I think he's a nice pickup, too. I mean, it's still all about Ron. So the other things are just pieces.
All right, how do you see the...
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead, JB.
Well, I just wanted to hear Rick's guess on what we were speculating about based on the 60 Minutes report where Alex Smith said he was emboldened by this last season. If you had to guess Alex's future, what would you guess?
Well, I'll go back to my bet book and say he'll still be here next year starting. Wow. Hey, I got a bet book. I got to stay with me. I got to go to Virginia now and start betting it again. But, I think Alex wants to come back. That's pretty obvious. Do they want him back? I think it depends on some other things. Free agency doesn't show me anything in quarterbacks that I'd say, well, let's go get that guy instead. Deshaun Watson, hey, you can trade for Deshaun Watson, go for it. I don't think, 20 other teams are bidding too. It's going to be pricey. But if this team is set to win now, I'd go get Watson and pay the price. Go ahead and mortgage the future because you don't know what that's going to be. If you can win now, do it now. But I don't think that's a long shot to get him. And the draft, they're not going to get one of the pretty ones, but maybe they get, the kid from Georgia, Newman, or maybe Trasker. I don't know, Tasker rather. There's a chance. There's a lot of ways this could work. But one of them is Ron Rivera knows that Alex went 5-1 for him here. Not going to be a long-term starter, going to be a spot player. But I could see him back here. And you try the two kids and see if they're, nobody has real belief that the other two are your long-term success. So you got to try and see what you can stopgap for now.
So you're still in stopgap mode, other than Deshaun. Are there any other guys out there you'd be willing? Let's just say the Jets give up on Darnold. Would you turn over the reins to him?
If you can get him somewhat cheap, okay. That doesn't really inspire me a whole lot. The Marcus Mariotas of the world. Marcus Mariotas of the world. No, you might as well just stay with Alex for that point.
The thing is Alex can't stay healthy.
I know. I'm saying he's only your spot starter. There's no doubt of that. You really want to get your next guy on the roster if you can in the draft. If there's a guy that you really like, go for it. If there's not a guy you really like, then just don't press it because that's what happens with Haskins. Here's the thing with Haskins. You saw what a kid like Heineke could come in and do, or you see the young quarterbacks that are in the playoffs. Those guys don't need to be developed. They just need to be polished. Haskins was never that guy. It was good to go ahead and move on from him because you could polish him forever. He's still not going to be it. That's the whole thing for the next few months is what happens with this quarterback. I mean, the rest of the team is kind of what it is.
Right. Well, that's what Ron said. Ron said it's the biggest, it's the biggest decision we have to make in the offseason. It's the number one priority. So quarterback is where they got to go. And whether it's drafting one or trading for one or signing one, that's the biggest decision. And by the way, these new guys coming in, the Martys, in the next 3 or 4 years, you're kind of defined by what you do at quarterback in their first year.
Well, Marty drafted Cam Newton, so you have that one.
Mm-hmm. He was also sitting at number 1 overall.
Well, ones do fail.
That's true.
That's true.
And did Stafford get drafted by Mayhew in Detroit? I think he did. Now, again, number 1 overall.
Yeah, I don't remember that exactly. And I know people want to talk about Stafford. There's another guy who can't stay healthy. I just don't think he'd be worth the price. Nice player, but you kind of want to get a young guy you can grow in with this team. This team is still young. They're not a last stand team, where you just got to plug them in. So I think they're, out of 32 NFL teams, probably 25 would upgrade their quarterbacks if they could. So Washington's no different than anybody else, but they're in a more precarious state. They've got a ready-made team to probably be a playoff team next year if they can get a quarterback to make this offense work. There's other pieces, But this is, I write about quarterbacks. I never write about guards, or tackles. This is always what it's about, is the quarterbacks. And they've been through, what is the number now, like 33 or something since the last Super Bowl? 34? I mean, that's insane.
That's why I'd give them all the picks, all the players. I'd sacrifice next year if I had to solidify that spot for the next 10 years. If they got Deshaun Watson, he's by far the best quarterback they could possibly get, and they'd have him for 10 years.
I agree with you there. And it's going to take it's going to take 3 ones and a player probably, a real starter.
Take them.
Would you give them Sweat?
Sure.
I mean, I would. Would, because you still got 3/4 of a line. Why not?
Sure, and then re-sign Kerrigan, squeeze out another year, and then try to find the best next stud coming. Defensive ends are a dime a dozen. You know what aren't? Quarterbacks.
True. And, 3, could it go to 4 ones? Whoa, man, that's because if it goes wrong, injuries happen. We've seen it. Yeah. And then you're doomed. When you miss on a first-round quarterback, it's typically considered you cost your franchise 2 to 3 years falling back.
Yeah. It's what happened with Robert. It's what happened with Robert. But
Haskins.
I was for it. Yeah, I was for it. It didn't work out.
The problem, Rick, is the other teams that may be interested in Watson are drafting higher. So when you flop that, when you get that first-round pick in this year's draft, it's going to be higher with other teams. Yeah, not 19.
That's why you have to get more. You might have to go that.
Yeah. You might have to do the fourth. Yeah, you might have to go to the 4th one, right?
Wow, that would be true Beathard style there. So maybe Marty's, Beathard. I don't know how many ones Beathard ever had. Not very many.
Yeah, when you go back and you look at Washington's draft history, they don't have there was a period there where they didn't have many first-round picks for a long time.
I wonder if Houston would accept the deal from Washington if they added another first-round pick versus the Jets, who have the 2nd pick this year. In other words, if the Jets only stayed at the 3 number ones and a player, Washington added a 4th number 1 and a player.
Yeah, you'd have to. With the 2nd pick overall, plus you probably want another 2nd or something in there too. Especially if they could go to the Jets and say throw in another 2nd, because you're still picking 2nd overall. That would be worth it too. Yeah, there's just a lot of bidders. That's why this is hard. It's not like there's just 3 or 4 guys. There's 20 teams that probably call and say, what do you want? And then how many seriously will bid? Handful. Only takes 2, but you could seriously have 4 or 5 teams. Miami's talking.
Yeah, well, what about Deshaun, the fact that he has a no-trade clause, right? Is that correct, Cakes?
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe he could, we could butter him up somehow through his agent, and he could say, hey, I want to go to Washington, and he doesn't approve the other deals.
That's very possible. You have some positives to bargain with here with him. You're coming to Washington, D.C., which is the nation's capital. And there's a lot of exposure, and guys do well here. And there's a lot of great things about living here. But, it's also a young team around you. You still will be the focus of everything. It's going to be about you. But you've got a team that can win versus, if you go to someplace that just isn't. You've got an owner that will spend the money, so your next contract will be big too. Yeah. So there's a lot that you can go with. I mean, I don't know who would be a better position, per se, with the Jets.
Miami maybe.
Miami, also, there are teams you're not thinking about. You keep saying that there's 20 teams. I just read 3 hypothetical trade scenarios from the Steelers. A team like that's going to move on probably from Big Ben eventually, and maybe they would make it sooner rather than later. Yeah. They ship off, Micah Fitzpatrick and a couple of first-round picks, or T.J. Watt, a couple of first-round picks, and boom, they've got their next quarterback for the next decade.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, like I said, there's a handful of teams that are good with their quarterback. Everybody else will take a look at this. Yep. But not everybody wants to pay the money or pay the picks. You got owners out there that don't want to spend the money like this. So, and I don't know what his cap number is this year. I haven't seen it. But, this year's cap's going to be tough because it's going to go down probably a little because last year new fans and all that money.
I think he's making in the neighborhood of $40 million.
Yeah, I thought so. So, my God, what are you going to have to strip away to be able to afford that too? You almost have to trade a starter away just to get that salary off. And if that happens, certainly Alex isn't coming back with his money. So there's a lot to it. But I think their best chance for success is to get Watson. But it comes at the maximum price.